Hey y'all, and welcome back to Joey's Booked. As you can see behind me, we are here today with my Stephen King shelf. This one is in a really awkward spot, so it's usually kind of hard to film in. But I figured that was probably going to be the best way to introduce today's video, because we are going to do another continuation of reading all of Stephen King's books in publication order. Now, I have started to notice a little bit, whatever list I've been using, I think some of these books may have started coming out at like the same years, and I've seen some real discrepancies in these lists. So we're just going to go through them in whatever order the list I had was in. So if I was slightly off or whatever, my bad. But it's still going to be basically publication order. So if we look at my shelf behind me, this is a lot of books. So here over are everything that I've read so far, not including like the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. There is a lot that I still need to read. I think the last time that I kind of checked, if I kept reading one Stephen King book a month, it was going to take me at least like 5 or 6 more years probably to get through this challenge. So what I think I've decided is I'm not going to do less than one a month. I might do an extra book here or there and just kind of see if I can get a few more in. What that also means is I feel like I've really just been oversaturating my channel, where there's just so many individual reviews for these books, which still may happen from time to time. But I think I'm going to try to combine maybe some more books into vlogs and kind of see what happens. Or even if it's not a vlog, maybe it will just be kind of like a reading update kind of as I go. Something where I'm doing maybe multiple books in a video. So for this video, based off of where I left off and I had my bit of a gap, the only other book that I don't have on here, besides The Stand, because that's with my special edition books right now, is Misery. Which, if the lighting's a little weird on this, I apologize. The glare was even worse the way I had it before, and it was a little harder to see. Misery is going to be my first book in this video, and I am really excited to kind of jump into this one because it is one of my favorite film adaptations of a Stephen King book that I have seen. So this is one of the few that I have left that I've seen an adaptation of at all, let alone before I've read the book. And I'm very excited about this one because in Misery we are following Annie Wilkes, who is one of my favorite villainous characters of all time, especially Kathy Bates playing her in the movies. And then we have Paul Sheldon, who is this writer who has been in like this car accident after he was up writing a novel in like a cabin and snow has come down, and Annie Wilkes has found him, brought him home, and nursed him back to health in the midst of like blizzard, snowstorm, whatever. As Paul soon finds out, Annie is also his #1 fan. And Annie is not happy with how her favorite series of his has seemingly ended. And we kind of go into all the crazy that happens there. So I am really excited to get into this, and hopefully I'll check back in when I have an update. I may read the whole once, because for a King book, this is only about 310 pages in this edition. So it's been a little bit since I have even got in front of the camera, but I have finished Misery. I keep kind of forgetting to give much of an update, and it's been a couple of days, and yeah, so I finished it. I don't have it with me at the moment. I am at Tabitha's, and I realized I finished the book and then never gave an update or anything, and yeah, we're here. Me and Tabitha typically get together a lot on Friday nights, and we do dinner and hang out, and sometimes just stay over or whatever instead of driving home late at night, content plan, all that cool stuff. But apparently this time, Tabitha has decided to let me use her office. And this is what she has left me with. A giant, empty room. No space. She told me I could either sleep in her office chair or on a fold-out table. How considerate. But at least I've got a book to read. Not Misery right now, though. We're taking a minute. In all seriousness, though, I do have a bed. Maybe. We're back. Still only have a fold-out table to sleep on. So Misery. I think I am going to end up giving Misery 4 stars. So, this book was a little bit different than I expected, but not at all at the same time. I think I'm landing on a 4 star instead of a 5, and part of it was just because I don't think it needed to drag on quite as long as it did. There were some anecdotes in it of, like, the book Misery that Paul Sheldon is writing, and they really drug on, and I didn't feel like they added that much to the story, which was kind of sad, because it could have been such a cool device to use, but I also just didn't care about the Misery story itself. Like, I didn't care what was going on in that. It was like a historical something romance. I don't even remember. I was not invested. Did not care. So that's really the big reason that it bogged down. Now, there were some really gruesome scenes that were even more so than the movie, which is a really pleasant surprise. I remember there's one scene in the movie that always makes me really just, like, cringe, even though it's, like, a little bit older film now. It still gets me. And what happened in the book was, like, 10 times worse. I was not expecting it to go all out. Annie Wilkes, absolutely crazy. I didn't feel like the way they've shown her in media with the way that she phrases words, I think it was dumb, but I don't think it was near to the extent with words like cockadoodie and oogly and just like her weird mannerisms. Now they were in there, don't get me wrong, but I feel like almost Paul used them mocking Annie more than anything. So that was kind of a little bit of a letdown too. Overall, I really enjoyed it though. I would always highly recommend it, and it's still going to be near the top of Stephen King books for me. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to rank right now. We'll worry about that when I've read most of them. Really good time with this one. It really pulled me out of a slump. This is, I think, the first book in 2025 I've given over a 3 star. It's been a rough start to the year, so just really happy about that. Going forward, I know my next book is going to be, I believe, the Tommyknockers, which is going to be a little bit of a bigger one, and I know got a few more after that that I think are a little chunky too. I am curious, after Misery, this is where we start to get in the line of Stephen King books I'm not as familiar with. I think I've mentioned in other videos, I have already read It, which I think technically would have been before Misery anyways, but if I remember right. But I'd already read it, and it's such a chunker that, like, we're not rereading that for this challenge. But I do believe Tommyknockers is next. I don't remember exactly how long it is since I'm not at home. I'd have to look. I'll fill you in when I get to it. And then I know there's a couple big ones, but I'm hoping, even though I probably won't get to it in this video, that means within my next video I should hopefully be getting to the new Dark Tower book soon, because that's going to put me on number 3, which is The Wastelands, and I'm really excited for that one. So it's kind of giving me a bit of a momentum to maybe pick up some more Kings if I have time. Anyways, I will check back in. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get to it, because I have some other reading plans and stuff, and this is going to be kind of extended throughout, who knows how long, maybe a few months. Depends on how long it takes me. So I will check back in with you once I start on the next one. So it's going to be a quick jump for you. It's probably going to be quite a while for me. It's been a while since I've talked to you last. For you, it's probably just been a few seconds. But we are now in February. I just filmed my January wrap-up. Anyways, it's been a while for me since I've talked to you, because I only picked up one Stephen King in January. But I am about to start my next Stephen King for this video. So my next book that I am picking up, and I'm not really 100% sure that I'm super in order, because I keep finding different lists that move some of these things around. So we're just kind of going with it at this point, and they're close to being in publication order. I really think I'm off. The next book that I am going to be starting by Stephen King is going to be The Tommyknockers, which is another big one. This clocks in around 500 and something, like 550 pages. And I have a lot of February plans I need to read for, but I have been waiting almost 2 months for this audiobook to come in. And I probably would have started it before February even started, since I'm being loose on my monthly thing, as long as I get one in a month. But I've got to read this while I've got the audio, because the audio for this is like 27 hours long. It's only 500 and something pages. That's longer than most of his other ones that I've read. Anyways, The Tommyknockers. What is this? Good question, because this is one of those Stephen King books I don't hardly know anything about. So we're going to kind of look at this a little bit together. I believe this is him kind of taking a sci-fi horror type of twist. And I know that this one's more of a controversial one, where not everyone loves it. But what it says on the inside is there's like this poem or something about Tommyknockers. But it says, it began with nothing more frightening than a nursery rhyme, yet in Stephen King's hands it becomes an unforgettable parable of dread, a threat from an unimaginable darkness that drags the practical inhabitants of a New England village into a hell worse than their own most horrible nightmares and yours. It looks like we are following a writer named Roberta Anderson, who was looking for firewood in the forest that stretches behind her house. I guess she goes by Bobby, because it just randomly changed names, talking about the same person. But she stumbles over 3 inches of metal, which unusually heavy spring runoff has left sticking out of the soil. At first she thinks it's a beer can, so on, but then starts to think others. And then it says it's the discovery of a ship in the earth, buried for millions of years, but still vibrating faintly and humming. And then she starts to dig it up. So I'm assuming this is maybe like aliens or something that are in this spaceship that this woman discovers in the woods, and it's going to go from there. I'm not going to read too much further in the synopsis, because I don't know the last time I've read a Stephen King book with zero clue what it's even about. So I'm going to be making dinner soon. I'm technically reading another book right now for my Buzzwordathon. I'm currently reading the next Wayward Children series book, which is a drastic change, which is A Drifting Currents Clean and Clear. And this counts for both prompts for me, so I guess we can document that somewhere. But I do think, since I've got this on audio and I've got to get it going, I'm going to be making dinner and stuff soon. We're going to get started, and once I've made, whenever that is, some significant progress into the book, I will come back in with some kind of update. You'll see me in a few seconds. I will see you in however long it is. Okay, so I am now I'm on part 2 of The Tommyknockers, and I feel like now I can actually say what this is about. That was just a dust jacket, because I don't leave the dust jacket on when I read. I don't like the feel of it if it's not like a library book. I guess that kind of defeats the point of the jacket, but whatever. Anyways, in The Tommyknockers, we are following, for short, Roberta, or Bobby, and we have Gardner, and they are 2 people living in Haven. I forgot already. I promise I've been reading this book. It's been a really long week, and I'm home from work. And my brain's shot, but I knew if I didn't update now, I would forget to update probably until I was at least over halfway through the book. Anyways, we have Bobby and we have Gardner, and we are just kind of following them. At the beginning, Bobby is like walking through the woods with her dog or whatever, and she kind of hits this piece of metal, and she kind of trips over and is like, ooh, what's that? But then she kind of starts to get obsessed with it, and I think it's supposed to be a spaceship is what they're saying, is what she's found covered up in the earth that's been there for a long time. And then we also have Gardner, who I guess is like, I think he's had relations with Bobby at some point in the past, but they're also friends. They're both writers, or Bobby's a writer. I'm going to be straight up. I know I'm trying to explain this. Basically, ladies find what's questionably a spaceship buried in the ground, and then friend comes to see her, and it looks like she's gotten super obsessive with it, and like digging it, and her health's gone downhill, And she has some kind of solar complex type thing in her water heater. And then she has like these machines she starts to make or something. And she's just really obsessed with this supposed spaceship she's been digging up over time. I don't like it at all. This is already well on its way to possibly beating The Dead Zone as my worst Stephen King book. I think at part 2 I'm like 30% of the way through, and if this wasn't a challenge of mine to read all of these Stephen King books, it would be a DNF 50 pages ago. It's not going good. I've been reading on this for 4 days, and I'm 150 pages in out of like 550 or something like that. And I'm listening to it on audio right now at like 2.5 speed, and I'm still only 30% of the way through. I am struggling with this. Yeah, I know there's interviews of it, but it's very obvious this is like the last book Stephen King wrote before he got clean. We're gonna finish it. This may be the only book I read in February at this rate. This may take me longer to read than The Stand. No, it can't, because I only have like 8 days left on the audiobook before I have to send it back. I don't have good things to say. It's bad. It's bad. It's just really bad. So anyways, my parents are apparently surprising in Nashville. So I guess I might be getting dinner with them tonight, which will be nice. And then I need to make some progress in this at some point, because this is one of my only days to do it, because I'm also seeing family this weekend when I normally would have time, so I guess I'll get some audiobook in the car. I don't know when I'm going to update again next, or if I'm going to do it as it goes throughout, but hopefully something interesting starts to happen, because if not, it's going to be bad. Anyways, it's bad. I don't like it. As of right now, this is gearing up to where it could be on my worst books of the year already. 2025 has got to start giving me something better. So, I'll update you when I'm done. And yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, we have finally finished the Tommyknockers. Thank God. This was rough. I don't remember what my last update even was talking about this. I think I updated hopefully at the end of part 1, but I was going to update. There's 3 parts. I don't know. End of each section. Yeah, no. This became just a feat to finish it alone. This started off, I'm going to be giving this 2 stars, and that is a very conditional 2 stars. This is now either my second least or my least favorite Stephen King book yet. It's in competition with The Dead Zone, because I notoriously I've really did not like Dead Zone either, but for different reasons. Anyways, okay, Tommyknockers. Going into the second part of the book, it becomes this weird, The Stand meets Salem's Lot, but make it sci-fi kind of vibe. So basically, the whole almost second section, like there is a little bit of plot that's kind of interspersed throughout of why this is going on. But basically, it's like, if you've read The Stand, the first third of the book, or at least the unabridged one, is just all of these vignettes about things going on and happening to different people. And it's like these giant vignettes in the Tommyknockers of what's going on, because apparently this spaceship has got some weird stuff going on and it starts affecting the town. So it's like how different people are being affected, and then there's kind of like this background mystery that starts to come up because of it. And then it's like the affecting of this small town, so that kind of pulls in the Salem's Lots vibe, where it's like trying to make Haven this kind of talking point, whatever. And so many of these, it just does not work. The vignettes on random people experiencing this thing. I enjoyed Salem's Lot, and I love the town vibe thing, but just the way they're all experiencing this weird stuff happening, it just doesn't work for me when it's so drawn out. 200 pages of that, it is just not going to be good, in my opinion. It is too much. It is overwritten. And then the third part is when everything really starts to kick off. It was very segmented out, very when things really start to go down and all the craziness starts into the heavy sci-fi horror type things. It was very evident what point of Stephen King's life that he wrote this, and I know I've seen where there's like interviews and stuff where he's even said like, yeah, this book is too long, there's a good book in there somewhere, and that's why I'm still giving it kind of 2 stars. There are good elements to this book. There is a good story in there somewhere. However, too many vignettes. This is probably one of his most overtly, like, sexual books I have read yet, and it's so unnecessary to an extreme extent. And normally I'm like, whatever if that's in a book. I don't make a fuss about any of that. Like, it's a book, it's media, you're write it if it fits. It doesn't. It is so unnecessary. And some of the descriptions that are even used in it, like, we've come up with like every little word in the book except what's actually going on, and it's just not, it's ridiculous. I don't know, there's not a single really likable character in any of it. Everyone's just making dumb decisions up until the point this is happening. It gets weird in the end, and I knew it was supposed to be a weird one, and I know that it's divisive for a reason, but like, I don't know, it was like, let's take this horror sci-fi spin on the Brave Little Toaster. And then the whole thing, the way that it wrapped up was really all over the place. There was potential for something good. So I'm giving it 2 stars because I can see the merit in it. Well, hopefully after re-looking back at this, King is happy that he cleaned up on some things, because it was evident. And I think in the grand scheme of like Stephen King books, this would be a 1. But because he still shows that he can write, he still shows that he can do these other things, it's a 2 overall. It's just a very low 2 for me. Anyways, I don't want to think about this book anymore. I don't want to touch it until my end of the month wrap up. I want to move on. I believe The Dark Half is my next book. I want to say that's correct, but I will be checking in with you, for you guys here in a minute. For me, probably end of the month, next month, depending on when I get to it and what I need to pick up, because I've got some more vlogs and things I need to really get moving on to get ahead for March, since busy season's going to be starting for me. We'll check in once I've started the next book. It's probably going to be the last one for this vlog. So I'll see you then. So we are to the final book, or in this case, maybe books, of this vlog, because it is now March, and I typically read these Kings at the beginning of the month. I don't know how these booktubers do these month-long vlogs and keep up with what they talk about and everything else. Probably they take notes, which I don't, and that's on me. But seriously, like, this is a lot to keep up with in general, like, over an amount of time. So hopefully this turns out well. So we are in the final stretch, though, because I have technically already started the next book. So I have finally started the last book of the vlog, because I had to wait a little bit to film, and I've been reading it for a couple of days, but I've been really busy, so like I only got a short little way in. I think I'm going to add a bonus book to this video, because when I was looking at what I'll be reading for my next set of Stephen King books, I realized that this is around the time that I have a book that I wasn't really going to count for this challenge. Just happened to find this in the Stephen King section, I think at McKay's or some bookstore like that. But he had written a coffee table book. He wrote the text for it, so it's only really like 30 pages of text, because it's like a picture art photograph kind of book. But in the 80s, he did write the text here for Nightmares in the Sky. Nightmares in the Sky is a series of photographs, it says by F. Fitzgerald, which, if you can see that, is a really interesting way to do the name. I don't know a lot about photography. But the text in here was included by Stephen King, and really, this is just a bunch of photographs of, like, gargoyles and stone facings and stuff like that. And I thought I might as well go ahead and flip through it and give it a read. The only reason I ever bought it in the first place is because it had Stephen King's name on it and he wrote the text. But it is part of my collection, because I will buy just about anything he has written for. So I thought that could just be a neat little, maybe something different to include in here, because it's around the time it was published. However, the book that I've actually started, and I think I'm about 120 pages into at this point, is The Dark Half. And in the dark half, we are following Thaddeus, and he is a writer in the modern times that we're, well, not now modern times, but when it's set in the 80s. But anyways, when Thad was 11 years old, he had a brain tumor and started having all of these issues. So they take him to a doctor, he has to have surgery to get it removed, all of that. But unknown to Thad and his family, some weird, freaky stuff happens during this surgery, because it's not just a regular tumor, and I don't want to go into all the details of that. But Doctor hides whatever weird stuff is happening, doesn't tell him. Thad goes on, he grows up, lives a normal life. And as an adult, he is starting to have some of these symptoms and stuff of when he had that tumor as a kid, but also some other weird stuff has started happening. He has gone on to become a pretty big name writer, but under a pen name, because he wasn't super successful with his first 2 books. So now Thad has gone by the name of George Stark for years and has become pretty popular. Thad has finally reached the point in his life where he's got 2 twin kids, or twin babies, and he's ready to move on, and he is laying George Stark to rest as a pen name, which is pretty synonymous to Stephen King himself, because he did temporarily write under the name Richard Bachman to see if his books would sell more if they weren't attached to his name. And this was shortly after Thinner, and he's already kind of done away with that name, even though he ends up using it a couple more times in the future. In the case of Thad / George Stark, some weird things have started to happen. And there is, right now, there's been like a murder, and Thad's prints and stuff have been found at the crime scene, and he's got an alibi, and that's kind of where I'm up to right now. I didn't know much about this one going into it, other than some like questionable doppelganger type stuff. But it seems like George Stark is been somehow a thing, because a lot of the things happening at these crime scenes and stuff kind of line up with this pen name character that they had created and have now even publicly like killed off. So it looks like the dark half is going to be something with this pen name, which is a really interesting kind of take. It's really giving me, though, The Outsider by Stephen King with this, how can you be in like 2 places at the same time kind of thing, because that's the premise of The Outsider. So I think it's really interesting, having not really known much about this, and having The Outsider be one of the few Stephen King books I have read that is left without, like that's newer. So it's kind of, I think this I'm finally getting where they say like Stephen King kind of has been known to reuse some things. So I'm really curious to like compare it. So far I am really, really liking it. We have been introduced to Pangborn, who is like a character who I think is supposed to reoccur in multiple Stephen King works. I know he was in the show Castle Rock. And yeah, I'm having a pretty good time. At some point, I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead and I'll read Nightmares in the Sky as well, because I do want to read the text in it. And I will give you an update once I have read more. I am back with a few updates. So, first thing is I did decide to read through Nightmares in the Sky. I actually kind of enjoyed this a little bit. It wasn't like the best, most entertaining thing, and it was some definitely stream of consciousness ramblings from Stephen King in the chapters, which, as chapters, it's literally set up in like Stephen King chapters. And some of this text is dense, but what do you expect? It's Stephen King. It definitely reminded me of a shorter form almost of reading like Dance Macabre. It's very Stephen King nonfiction-y. I do want to show my favorite little gargoyle out of this, though, because, well, for one, where is all of the horror books and just books in general and like media about gargoyles? Like, I remember there was like I think there was a cartoon or movie when I was a kid called Gargoyles that I loved when I was growing up. And like, in books, the closest thing I can really think of anything, I think Nestlings by Nat Cassidy, which that wasn't really gargoyles for the most part that I remember. The cover kind of gives those gargoyle vibes. But anyways, even when I was trying to look up books about gargoyles, this was actually one of the first things that came up, and it's a coffee table book. That and some weird paranormal romances, which we are going to stay away from. Anyways, I wanted to show my favorite little gargoyle out of this, because can we please talk about this little big creature thing eating its mango or whatever it is that's cut up? I am obsessed with this little fetal looking guy, and I need one. Someone find me a way to have that in my home, please and thank you. I did really enjoy some of the conversations he was having in here. I will now forever think of gargoyles as just goyles. Especially I loved Stephen King trying to embarrass his child and writing a little story about him and how they used to watch a movie about gargoyles together. And the whole thing, I don't know, it was cute. It was weird reading. It's always weird to me reading about like Joe Hill as a kid, because I'm used to having read him as an author. So it's just one of those things that's kind of interesting in going back and talking about King and stuff. I don't think I'm going to rate this, or at least not right now. I think if I would have given it a rating, I mean, it was like 35 pages of text and then like 100 more pages of gargoyles. I don't know, it would probably be around a 3-ish star maybe if I tried to rate it, because some of the writing was very stream of consciousness and meandering, and not every picture was like the most exciting kind of photo. Not everyone can look like this little dude here on the cover, who I also want. I'm learning I really apparently like gargoyles, and I need some gargoyle stuff now. We're going to leave this one unrated, but this was a fun little bonus book. And I am going to count this towards my reads of the year, because I did read all 35 pages of those Stephen King ramblings. Who would have thought I'd be reading a coffee table book? Just saying. Okay, I'm not reaching across the table to grab the physical book, but I have reached part 3 of The Dark Half. I'm on part 3, and unfortunately, I said in the beginning, I was like, I'm really, really liking this one, and then I think I even updated my Goodreads and was like, is this a potential hidden gem that I'm gonna love? And then I started reading part 2, and I got bored. And it was like the majority of part 2 minus some pages just are unnecessary. And normally I'm like, I love the descriptive Stephen King writing and stuff a lot of the time. It's not even that it's descriptive. And maybe I'm just zoning out a little bit when I'm reading it, but there's something I'm not loving about this middle section. I don't know if it's not even necessarily the detective-y stuff, it's super kind of almost mundane for how strange the beginning was. And don't get me wrong, there have been some definitely some body horror-ish kind of stuff happening, and when it does happen, it's a bit extreme even for stuff I've read from King so far. You know, there is a good bit of action in it, but there's something about just the process of getting there that just goes on and on. It's like getting there just takes so long of just these people talking and being like, oh this, oh that, but what about this? But I already know this. I'm not gripped by it. And I'm wanting something a little bit more. And every time I put it down for anything or take the audio out, I don't want to pick it up and I want to read something else, which is not a great sign. There's something about this. I know people love the older Stephen King stuff, and I love his really early works, don't get me wrong. This, and I mean, I technically am skipping over it because I've read it before and that's my all-time favorite. But besides that, this middle ground King area, there's been some good ones, a few good ones. You know, Misery was pretty good. But I don't know. I think I've just hit a stretch and I need something more going further into this challenge. I think I'm going to cut off this update here. I'm going to try to finish The Dark Half, and I think that will be it for this video. So I will check back in with you once I have an update.